Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Addis News Hour. With the news, I'm Shifar Alaka, and thank you for joining us. Now, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Dammaqaa Mokonnin conversed with the Ambassador of Switzerland in Ethiopia, Ambassador Tamara Mona. The Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister commended the long-standing and historical relationship between Ethiopia and Switzerland. He said the two countries should explore the potential for strengthening their relationship by initiating regular political consultations and various trade and investment engagements. He also briefed the Swiss ambassador about the current situation in Ethiopia and the peace-building initiatives that the government has been undertaking so far. Congratulating Switzerland for being elected as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for 2023-24, the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister expressed hope that the country would, as always, take a balanced and reasonable position on global agenda items. The ambassador of Switzerland, on her part, stressed that her country's first-time membership in the Council would prioritize some agenda items such as sustainable peace, climate change, and the effectiveness of the UN and protection of the rights of civilians. The ambassador expressed her desire that Ethiopia would share its experience with Switzerland as a country that served as a non-permanent member of the Council multiple times. The ambassador said many Swiss companies are interested to invest in Ethiopia, and Switzerland is keen on strengthening its relationship with Ethiopia, particularly in trade and investment. In another development, Ethiopian ambassador to the Republic of Zimbabwe, Ambassador Rashid Mohammed, paid a courtesy call to the acting Foreign Affairs and International Trade Minister of Zimbabwe, Professor Amon Murwira. On the occasion, the two sides discussed bilateral relations between Ethiopia and Zimbabwe and noted the need to focus on action-oriented cooperation. Ambassador Rashid also expressed his gratitude to the government of Zimbabwe for the warm welcome accorded to him since his arrival in Harare. Ambassador Rashid noted that the time-honored Ethiopia-Zimbabwe ties are built upon a solid foundation of African brotherhood, spirit, and unity, recalling the contributions of Ethiopia in the decolonization struggle of many African countries, including Zimbabwe. In this regard, he said Ethiopia's unwavering commitment and practical support to the liberation struggles of African countries emanated from the country's deep belief in the ideals of Pan-Africanism and African solidarity. Ambassador Rashid noted that he is greatly honored to serve Ethiopia as an ambassador in Zimbabwe, further pledging to make substantive contributions to the development of the bilateral relations and underscoring the need for further engagements in the economic, social, and public diplomacy arenas. Ethiopia is ready to enrich the connotations of the bilateral ties in various fields, viewing it from a strategic and forward-looking perspective, the ambassador added. We apologize for that inconvenience. Now, moving on, the upcoming Russia-Africa summit is said to mark a significant step toward more economic independence of the African continent. The remark was made by the Russian ambassador to Ethiopia, Yevgeny Terekhin. The summit will take place in Ethiopia in 2023 in the presence of leaders of more than 54 African nations as well as other parties. Russian Foreign Minister is also due to arrive in Addis Ababa next week for a two-day-long working visit. Kasam Chane reports.
Russia says it hopes the African Continental Free Trade Area (ACFTA) would pave the way for Africa's complete independence from all forms of oppression and discrimination. As a result, friendship and cooperation constitute the foundation of Russia-Africa relations. The ambassador said the Russian Federation is committed to support Africa's continued progress in accordance with the strategic decisions taken at the first Russia-Africa summit in Sochi in late October 2019.
Undoubtedly, the first Russia-Africa summit in Sochi in 2019 marked our country's historic return to the continent and was a crucial step in strengthening Russian-African relations. The unprecedented scale of the event brought together on one platform the heads of 43 African states and 10,000 participants in total. And the outcome of this summit, as embodied in its declaration, fully met the high level of the event. Multi-billion-dollar economic contracts were signed, cooperation in a number of other areas in political, humanitarian, security, etc., received a new impetus. Perhaps the results of the first summit were somewhat blurred by the coronavirus pandemic that followed and the global economic recession and the Ukrainian crisis. But we are ready to take as a basis what was achieved at the first summit and multiply it at the second one. Russia is ready not only to demonstrate its interest in Africa, but also to act practically in the name of developing our relations with the continent, which has a truly great future. We see that today the African continent is under great pressure from the West. Since the beginning of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine, this pressure has only increased. The task of the West is to isolate Russia, to force it out of the world political arena and international markets. Naturally, the cooperation of many African states with our country irritates some of the Westerners.
Appreciating Ethiopia's initiative with the Green Legacy, Ambassador Terekhin further disclosed that Russian FM Lavrov, along with his Ethiopian counterpart, Demeqa Mekonnen, and other senior government officials will plant trees in the premises of the Russian embassy.
We are fully supporting the Ethiopian government's Green Legacy initiative. Our embassy has repeatedly participated in seasonal tree planting, both within the framework of actions organized by the Ethiopian authorities and on its own initiative. In 2019, when the FDRE Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed announced the launch of the campaign, the embassy staff was present at Gulele Botanical Garden, where we participated in this inaugurational ceremony. That same year, a large-scale planting of seedlings also took place in our embassy compound. This year, we also participated in the launch ceremony of the forefront of the Green Legacy. Moreover, in order to demonstrate our support to the Ethiopian initiative, which is really and truly of global importance, a tree planting ceremony is planned on the territory of the Russian embassy by the Russian and Ethiopian foreign ministers during the working visit of the head of the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, to Addis Ababa. Of course, you understand that this will happen if the visit's program affords us, timing.
Lavrov is scheduled to meet with high-level government representatives while in Ethiopia to discuss the long-standing and historic ties between the two nations. Sergei Lavrov visited Ethiopia back in March 2018 and signed agreements in a number of fields.
Now, the Ethiopian government intensifies efforts to expedite a peaceful resolution of the conflict with the TPLF. Tigrayans continue to complain of forced conscription and bad governance. Professor Anne Fitzgerald, a political analyst who conducted sample interviews with Tigrayans, cautioned that any peace talk with the TPLF must prioritize Ethiopia's national interests. Tigistani has the following story.
Talking to ETV, Gerald depicted the voice of Tigrayans living under TPLF rule. Giving emphasis to local dimensions and perceptions of the conflict, Gerald said these internal dimensions help bring better solutions to the conflict.
Research identified what was deemed to be a gap in the literature. You know, all research projects start with a gap that they seek to investigate and make a contribution to a certain domain with. So it identified a gap in the literature in terms of perceptions, local perceptions of the conflict. And it surveyed many Tigrayan IDPs from both the civilian IDP camps and the former combatant IDP camp. It took a methodologically robust approach to organizing sample sets of respondents, which included younger, middle-aged, and older groups. The research not only triangulated across both IDP camps, but also with data from many focus groups and focus group meetings across the conflict-affected areas, Amhara and Afar, particularly in north and eastern, southeastern Afar and the Wollo area of Amhara. The questions asked of the respondents included background on their journey and how they had ended up at the camps and why they had ended up at their camps, their experience along the way, the humanitarian conditions that they experienced along the way and at the camps, the requirements for peace in Tigray and Ethiopia in the future.
Ruling a state of under the spell of a post-war trauma, the TPLF is worsening the situation with forced conscription for yet another round of war.
So the findings produced consensus on a number of issues. One was forced conscription and the forced conscription program that had been in place, led by the TPLF in Tigray, and the consequences for not cooperating with that forced conscription program, which included the arrest and imprisonment of family members, the issue of surrendering, which most of the people I spoke to had done, and they described it as giving their hand, something that they had been told never to do, to take their own lives before giving their hand. They spoke about the humanitarian conditions, which were variable across the camps. In one camp, there was a very positive set of humanitarian conditions. In another camp, the Jara camp, in Amhara, those conditions just were not even close to ideal. They also spoke about the way they were treated, which generally speaking was very positive. Not just treatment at the camps, but treatment by communities in Afar and Amhara along the way.
In terms of bringing peace in the northern part of Ethiopia, a feedback was forwarded which suggested a different sort of governance culture.
In terms of seeing peace come to Tigray and Ethiopia, the feedback really was consensual around a different sort of governance culture and structure that was needed in Tigray in the future. I think everyone I spoke to commented on the need for constitutional reform and the abolishment of the ethnic federalism model, which divides and is used for the purposes of inciting violence. And it was generally felt that whereas the country had come together over the years, you know, in the form of mixed marriages and living in different regions with different Ethiopian brothers and sisters, there was a view that this model was being used to re-divide and to re-disaggregate.
Now, United States chargé d'affaires to Ethiopia, Ambassador Tracy Jacobson, says the peace efforts initiated by the Ethiopian government are encouraging. Visiting IDPs in Dabat town of North Gondar zone, Jacobson said the humanitarian support of the U.S. government has reached more than 2 million IDPs in Amhara, Afar, and Tigray regions. According to her, the national dialogue and the peace talks initiated by the Ethiopian government are encouraging. The chargé d'affaires pledged that the U.S. will provide all necessary supports to make effective the anticipated national dialogue. Steps taken by the Ethiopian government to make humanitarian aid accessible to all are encouraging and seen on a positive side, she told the Ethiopian news agency. The humanitarian support provided by the U.S. government has reached more than 2 million displaced people in Amhara, Afar, and Tigray regions, she pointed out. According to her, some $660 million worth of food and non-food support has been provided so far. Now, moving on, IGAD says member states of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development needs to modernize early warning system to alleviate the negative impacts of drought. Talking to ETV English, IGAD Drought Resilience Sustainable Development Initiative coordinator said Ethiopia has been undertaking exemplary activities to overcome the impact of drought. Haptamo Ashagri reports.
Severe drought is a key challenge for the Eastern African countries, and it affects the lives of millions of Africans in the region. In an exclusive interview with ETV English, IGAD Drought Resilience Sustainable Development Initiative coordinator Mialam Shitaya said efforts are needed to minimize the negative impact of drought.
The role of IGAD in the first place, through its specialized institutions like ICPAC, IGAD Center for Climate Prediction and Application, a seasonal weather forecast is being disseminated to the member countries so as to take a proper preparation to undertake any required action against the prevailing drought. That is one. The second support or intervention being undertaken by IGAD is supporting mobilization of resource from the development partners. In this regard, I think a lot has been done, and this has been experienced for the last 10-15 years.
Despite severe drought in the Eastern African region, the coordinator said Ethiopia has been undertaking commendable measures to contain the negative impacts of drought.
The Ethiopian government has done significantly in providing an emergency response to those affected people or affected community by availing water tracking, and by availing feed for the livestock resource, and definitely through the National Disaster Risk Management and Commission, food and non-food items have been provided to save lives. Unfortunately, this year there is no any famine, there is no any deaths of people, although significant livestock population have been died. That's very unfortunate. Otherwise, the government is really making significant effort in providing response to the needed people in the drought-affected areas. I think we need to understand what drought means. Drought is a natural phenomenon which we can't avoid, but we can minimize the effect of the drought and other consequences. So in this regard, the member countries of IGAD need to have a comprehensive and holistic development approach to build the resilience capacity of the community at the grassroots level. And at the same time, the member states need also to improve the food and food security and nutrition security by large through the diversified development interventions, mainly focusing, especially when you talk about resilience building, the most fundamental issue is working along the natural resource management, that is the land rehabilitation, the water development, livestock-based infrastructures, diversified livelihood interventions, and maintaining peace and security, which is very important.
According to IGAD's data, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia accounting for 8.1, 4.1, and 7.1 million people affected food insecurity, respectively. As to Udmialam, IGAD member states need to realize modern early warning system and allocating appropriate finance to control its negative impact. The IGAD member states has adopted drought disaster resilience and sustainability initiative aiming to fight the negative impact of drought 11 years ago. Drought, famine, backwardness, conflict, food insecurity, among others, are the key bottlenecks of Eastern African countries, it was learned.
Welcome back. You're still watching Addis News Hour. Now, scholars comment that the AU should further strengthen to embrace and unite all member states as well as to achieve its very intended goals. They criticize that the UN has not ensured the expected economic development and peace. Many also question the benefits of the African Union for the continent, which has been established 20 years ago by changing the name and structure of the OAU. Johannes van Town has compiled the following story.
Many debate about the benefits of the African Union for the continent, which has been established 20 years ago by changing the name and structure of OAU. The Union was established as a main objective of the continent's economic and peace problems, but 20 years after its establishment, a great disturbance of peace and economic depression prevailed in the continent. Since its establishment, the African Union has made undeniable achievements, including the body's progress towards creating the condition for member states to play significant roles in international policy and negotiations. But many agree that this continental body is still crawling to assure the expected economic development and peace, and because of this, undeniable number of people doubt its future existence.
Across the African continent today, there are many reasons for African states to believe they no longer need the African Union. This comes on the heels of the recent military coups that have taken place in West Africa, whereas the African Union has simply responded through statements of condemnation. On the other hand, the African Union still remains very relevant, particularly given the fact that across the continent, there is an unequal distribution of power relations, whereby there are regional hegemons across the continent who have a tendency to exert their own will and influence as well as interests above those of others. And so the African Union serves as a regulatory body in this regard.
Many agree that the Union is not perfect at its current level, and there is a broad consensus that a huge institution is needed to unite Africa and represent the continent in the world's political and economic contests.
I've done a lot of reporting on the African Union, including on some of its worst aspects, investigations into sexual harassment, fraud, corruption, and yet I would still argue that the continent is a better place with it than without it. And that's because we need an institution that is able to present a unified African voice, that is able to argue for Africa's place on the international stage and plan for the continent's long-term future as a whole, not as individual countries, because there is no power in individual countries, there is power in collective action.
Many who believe there is still time for the African Union to achieve its main objectives in the continent describes the things that the Union can achieve in the future.
In terms of changing and improving the African Union, there are three things that we try. First is addressing the implementation gap that the African Union suffers from. The second is holding governments to account for the commitments that they have made. And the third and important is to shift the AU from we the heads of state and government to we the people of Africa.
The continental bloc made up of 55 member states is driven by the core principle of African solutions to African problems.
Now in business, Ethiopian Airlines has signed a proposal with the aircraft manufacturer De Havilland Aircraft of Canada Limited for the purchase of 2-8-400 freighters, large cargo door F-LCD conversion kits. Ethiopian said in its announcement that the proposal provides an option for an additional 2 F-LCD conversion kits. The parties are working to finalize a definitive and binding agreement. CEO of Ethiopian Airlines Group Mesfin Tasso said cargo has played a pivotal role in Ethiopian Airlines operations over the past couple of years and will remain a key growth pillar of the business over the coming years. Vice President of De Havilland Canada, Philip Pautiso for Sport, said the deal with Ethiopian Airlines proves the versatility of the -8-400. He further said Ethiopia's proposal with De Havilland Canada is a superb testament to the versatility of the -8-400 aircraft to satisfy a wide variety of operational requirements. Quote unquote, we are also excited to announce our partnership with the Ethiopian to offer -8 freighter conversion through their experienced MRO already at the Havilland Canada authorized service facility, he added. The aircraft has logged over 11 million flights hours and transported more than 570 million passengers. Ethiopian Airlines noted that worldwide the aircraft is in a fleet of more than 70 owners and operators. That is according to Asia Cargo News. Moving on, the Ethiopian government says it earned some 5 billion Ethiopian birr from energy exports to neighboring countries during the Ethiopian 2021-22 fiscal year that ended on July 7. Corporate Communication Director of EEP, Moges Mekonnen, said the earnings, a record high, were achieved through electric energy exports to Djibouti and Sudan. According to data given by the EEP, the revenues was up $5 million when compared with the previous fiscal year. The Ethiopian government in May announced its plan to increase the country's export revenue from electric power to $400 million within the coming 10 years. The East African country is working to boost electric power export from the already functional and under construction power plants to its neighboring African countries. Ethiopia's energy exports are part of a broader plan to economically integrate the East African region through electricity. The energy sector is one of Ethiopia's priorities as it envisages becoming a light manufacturing hub in Africa and a middle-income economy within the coming few years. Ethiopia has identified hydro, wind, geothermal, solar, and biomass for energy generation projects. You're still watching Addis News Hour. Let's now take some time and look at the foreign exchange rates of some currencies. And in our continental news coverage, the Kenyan general elections are scheduled to be held on August 9, 2022. Among the four presidential candidates, Raila Odinga and William Ruto are the four runners. The following piece by our staff reporter, Jerusalem Batsia, will look closely into the profile and career of the two contenders. Have a listen to this.
David Wahija Muware, leader of Angano Party, George Wajakoya from Roots Party, Raila Odinga, leader of Orange Democratic Movement, under Azimio la Umoja One Kenyan Alliance, William Ruto, current Deputy President of Kenya and leader of United Democratic Alliance, are the presidential candidates for the 2022 Kenyan election. However, Kenya's Raila Odinga and William Ruto are the two frontrunners for the August presidential election. Ruto was born in Sambutu village, Kenya in 1966. William Ruto's childhood epitomizes the lives of many poor Kenyans. He went to primary school barefoot, wearing his first pair of shoes at the age of 15. Ruto began his political career when he became the treasurer of the YK92 campaign group that was lobbying for the re-election of President Moi in 1992, from where he learned the ropes of Kenyan politics. He also held various ministerial posts, including education, and rose to the deputy presidency after the 2013 election.